The chamber was vast and cold. Ambassador Kang Hyun-woo stood in the center of the circular room, his hands bound behind his back with energy restraints. Above him, the 7 seats of the Galactic Council curved in a semicircle, each occupied by a representative of the ancient species that ruled the stars. Hyun-woo kept his back straight. He wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, dark blue with silver trim. The fabric was torn in places from rough handling, but he maintained his dignity. He had served humanity for 15 years in space. He would not break now. In the observation deck high above, Ji-won pressed her hands against the transparent barrier. She was Hyun-woo's communications officer and aide. Her eyes were red from crying, but she forced herself to watch. Someone had to witness this. Someone had to remember. The Veltharan hierarch rose from his seat. His name was Velmoth, and his species looked like tall mantis creatures with 4 arms and crystalline armor. His voice echoed through translation devices. The human stands accused of violating sacred space. 3 human vessels entered the forbidden zone of our ancestors. This is a crime punishable by death according to our laws. Hyun-woo spoke calmly. Those ships were on a mapping mission. They had no way of knowing that region was restricted. Your species never filed those coordinates with the navigation database. This was an accident, not a crime. Another council member spoke. This one belonged to the Torvan species, large beings covered in thick fur. The Veltharan laws are ancient. The Concordat recognizes traditional justice for sacred violations. Traditional justice? Hyun-woo's voice rose slightly. You mean murder? Those crews surrendered peacefully. They offered reparations. Instead, the Veltharans executed them without trial. 37 people died. Now you want to kill me too, as if executing an ambassador will somehow balance the scales. The council chamber fell silent. Several of the representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew this was wrong, but the Veltharans controlled the largest military fleet in this sector. No one wanted to oppose them. The hierarch's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The human admits his species violated our space. The law is clear. An ambassador's life will pay for the insult to our gods. Hyun-woo looked up at each council member in turn. You're doing this because humanity is young. We've only been in space for 50 years. We have 4 colony worlds and a small fleet. You think we don't matter. You think you can murder us and face no consequences. A reptilian council member spoke softly. Ambassador, please understand. This is politics. The Veltharans insist on this penalty. If we refuse, they threaten to leave the council. That could start a war that would consume entire sectors. So you'll sacrifice me to keep the peace. Hyun-woo smiled bitterly. How very civilized of you. The vote was called. 6 council members voted for execution. Only one, a small amphibious creature called a Nexian, voted against. The Nexian representative looked ashamed, but that changed nothing. Velmoth descended from his seat. He walked on his 4 legs with terrible grace. The sentence will be carried out immediately. According to our tradition, death by fire purifies the transgression. Ji-won gasped in the observation deck. Fire. They were going to burn him alive. Guards dragged a crystalline structure into the chamber. It looked like a vertical bed made of glass. They forced Hyun-woo onto it and locked his restraints to the frame. He didn't struggle. What would be the point? I want to send a final message to Earth, Hyun-woo said. His voice was steady. Velmoth considered this. You may have 1 minute. It will be monitored. They activated a communication link. Ji-won received it on her device. Hyun-woo looked directly at the camera. This message is for Admiral Park Tae-yang and President Choi Da-eun. I want everyone on Earth to know what happened here today. The Galactic Council has decided that human lives don't matter. They're executing me because they're afraid of the Veltharans and because they think humanity is too weak to respond. He paused, taking a slow breath. Tell my wife I love her. Tell my children their father died representing humanity with honor. And tell our leaders this: what happens next is their choice. But remember what these species did. Remember they watched me burn and did nothing. The communication cut off. Velmoth raised one of his 4 arms. Plasma emitters activated around the crystalline pyre. For the honor of our ancestors and the sanctity of our sacred spaces, let this human burn as purification for his species' crimes. The fire started at Hyunwoo's feet. It was not normal fire. Plasma burned at thousands of degrees, hot enough to melt metal instantly, but the Velthorans had calibrated it carefully. It would burn slowly, keeping Hyunwoo alive as long as possible. This was meant to be a lesson. Hyunwoo screamed. No amount of dignity could withstand that pain. His body convulsed against the restraints. The smell of burning flesh filled the chamber. Several council members looked away. The Nexian representative left entirely, unable to watch. Ji-won pounded on the barrier, screaming for them to stop. Security officers pulled her away from the window, but she kept screaming. The sound echoed through the observation deck, mixing with Hyunwoo's cries. It took 8 minutes for him to die. 8 minutes of unimaginable agony. As the light faded from his eyes, his lips moved one final time. The translation devices barely caught his last words. "You will regret this mercy you denied us." Then he was gone. His body slumped in the restraints, charred beyond recognition. The plasma emitters shut down. Velmoth nodded with satisfaction and returned to his seat. Let it be recorded that justice was served. The human's death cleanses the violation of sacred space. This matter is closed. The council began discussing trade agreements as if nothing had happened. As if they hadn't just murdered an ambassador, as if the rules of civilization meant nothing. Ji-won was escorted from the observation deck. Security wanted to confine her to quarters, but she broke away and ran to her ship. She had to get this recording to Earth. Every moment of the trial, every word, every scream. Humanity needed to see what the galaxy truly thought of them. Her small courier ship launched from Viridian Prime within the hour. The station's security tried to stop her, but she overrode the docking clamps and jumped to faster-than-light speed before they could lock her down with tractor beams. As she flew through the darkness between stars, Ji-won played the recording again. She watched Hyunwoo burn. She heard his last words, and she understood what he meant. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. On Earth, in the capital city of New Seoul, Admiral Park Tae-yang received the transmission. He watched it alone in his office. The recording lasted 43 minutes from start to finish. When it ended, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up his communication device and sent a single message to every military base, every ship, every installation humanity controlled across 4 star systems. Code Black. Full mobilization. No exceptions. President Choi Da-yun stood before the United Earth Assembly 6 hours later. The recording had been broadcast on every network. The entire planet had watched their ambassador burn. Rage was spreading like wildfire through humanity's worlds. "They think we're weak," she said quietly. The chamber was so silent that her whisper carried to every corner. "They think we'll accept this. They think we'll cry and protest and eventually forgive." She looked at the representatives, at the faces filled with grief and fury. "They're wrong. What they did to Hyunwoo, they did to all of us. This is not just murder. This is a declaration that human life has no value in their galactic order." Her voice grew stronger. "Then we will build a new order. One where ambassadors are sacred, one where justice means something, one where humanity stands equal to any species, no matter how ancient or powerful." She raised her hand. "We are at war, not just with the Velthorans, but with every species on that council who voted to burn our representative alive. Total war, no surrender, no compromise. We will make them understand what they've unleashed." The assembly voted unanimously. Every representative stood and approved the declaration of war. As the vote concluded, the lights of New Seoul began to dim. Power was being redirected to military production. Factories that made civilian goods retooled for weapons. Shipyards that built passenger vessels started constructing warships. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable. Around him, the fleet was gathering. Ships returned from the colonies. Crews reported for duty. Weapons were loaded and targeting systems activated. His second officer, Commander Yoon Min-seo, approached. "Sir, the fleet will be ready to move in 72 hours. What are our orders?" Admiral Park looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Veltharans were celebrating their victory. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council thought this matter was closed. "Prepare everything," he said quietly, "and send a message to our intelligence division. I want to know the location of every Veltharan military asset, every council facility, every station they consider important." "Sir, are we targeting military installations?" "Eventually." The Admiral's face was hard as stone. "But first, we're going to teach them why you don't execute ambassadors. We're going to make them afraid of the dark. And when they're terrified and desperate, when they realize what they've awakened, then we'll show them what real war looks like." He turned to his communications officer. "Begin Operation Ghost Protocol. All stealth ships are weapons-free. No survivors, no warnings. Just make them disappear." The officer hesitated. "Sir, those orders violate several protocols about—" "They burned our ambassador alive on intergalactic television," Admiral Park interrupted. "They wanted to send a message about what happens when you cross the Veltharans. Now we send our own message. About what happens when you cross humanity." The orders went out. In the darkness between stars, humanity's newest warships began to move. Ships no one had seen before, built in secret facilities, equipped with technology the other species didn't know existed. The ghost ships were hunting, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. The gathering storm. 2 days passed since Ambassador Hyunwoo died in flames. 2 days that felt like years to the people of Earth. Funeral services were held across the planet. Millions gathered in silence, watching replays of the execution on massive screens. The anger was no longer hot and explosive. It had crystallized into something cold and patient. Admiral Park Tae-yang stood in the war room deep beneath New Seoul. Around the circular table sat the commanders who would lead humanity's response. To his right was Commander Yoon Min-seo, head of Special Operations. She was small and quiet, but Park knew her teams could infiltrate any facility in the galaxy. To his left sat Dr. An Subin, Director of Advanced Weapons Research. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes from 72 hours without sleep. "Status report," Park said simply. Commander Yoon pulled up holographic displays. "All stealth ships are in position. We have 12 ghost destroyers in Veltharan space. They've been mapping patrol routes and military installations for the past 48 hours. The enemy has no idea we're there." "Good. What about our recall order?" 97% of human civilians have evacuated from Council space. The remaining 3% are either unreachable or refuse to leave. "We've sent warning messages to their last known locations." Park nodded. Those who stayed knew the risks. He hated leaving anyone behind, but they couldn't wait forever. Dr. An activated her own display. Technical schematics filled the air, showing weapons and ships that looked like nothing humanity had built before. "Project Prometheus is ready for deployment. We have 6 technologies that we've kept secret for exactly this scenario." "Tell me about them," Park said. "First, quantum masking. It doesn't just hide our ships from sensors. It makes them undetectable to every scanning method the Council species use. They rely on gravitational detection for finding cloaked vessels. Our masking creates false gravity shadows so their sensors see empty space. She switched images. Second, swarm AI. Thousands of autonomous drones that learn from combat in real time. Each one is cheap to produce but deadly in coordination. The Council has never fought anything like them because they consider autonomous weapons dishonorable. Park smiled without humor. Honor. They burn ambassadors alive but worry about honor. Dr. Ahn continued. Third, nanite disassemblers. We can deploy clouds of microscopic machines that break down shield generators at the molecular level. It takes hours, but it's silent and invisible. Fourth, gravitational warheads. They create localized gravity wells strong enough to crush ship hulls. Fifth, neural disruptors that shut down organic crew members without killing them. And the sixth? Park asked. Dr. Ahn hesitated. Targeted plague weapons? Designer viruses that only affect specific species based on their genetic markers. We developed them for the Veltharan specifically, based on biological samples from diplomatic exchanges. The room went silent. Several officers looked uncomfortable. Biological weapons were considered the worst war crime in galactic law. We won't use that one unless necessary, Park said finally. But make sure the Veltharans know we have it. I want them to understand that we can erase their entire species if we choose to. Fear is a weapon too. A young officer near the back raised her hand. Sir, what about the other council species? Do we target them as well? The Torvan, Krellians, and Saxith all voted for Hyunwoo's execution. The Nexians voted against. We hit the guilty parties only. But here's what's important. We don't start with military targets. Commander Yoon looked puzzled. Sir, we start by making them afraid. Patrol ships vanish, supply convoys disappear, communication relays go silent. No battles, no declarations, just an enemy they can't see or fight. We learned from Earth's history. Terror is a force multiplier. The briefing continued for another hour. Plans were finalized. Strike teams received their assignments. When it ended, only Park and Commander Yoon remained in the war room. Permission to speak freely, sir? Yoon asked. Always. Are we really doing this? Total war against species that have been in space for thousands of years? They have more ships, more experience, more resources. Park walked to the window overlooking New Seoul. The city stretched to the horizon, glittering with lights. 4 billion people lived in this metropolitan area alone. 12 billion on Earth, another 8 billion across the colonies. Commander, what do you think would happen if we did nothing? If we accepted Hyunwoo's death and continued playing by their rules? Yoon considered this. They'd see us as weak. Next time there's a conflict, they'd feel free to kill more of us. Eventually, humanity would be servants or slaves, always at the mercy of stronger species. Exactly. This isn't about revenge, though that's part of it. This is about teaching the galaxy that humans cannot be casually murdered. We're establishing a precedent. Touch our people, burn our ambassadors, and we will make you regret it so deeply that no species will ever try it again. He turned back to her. Yes, we're outnumbered. Yes, we're outgunned. But we have advantages they don't understand. We're used to being the underdogs. Human history is full of smaller forces defeating larger ones through innovation and determination. The Council species have been comfortable for too long. They've forgotten what real war looks like. Meanwhile, in the presidential palace, Choi Da-yoon met with Ji-won. The young woman had been given refugee status after fleeing Viridian Prime. She looked haunted, jumping at sudden sounds. You did well getting that recording to us, President Choi said gently. It doesn't bring him back. Ji-won's voice was hollow. I watched them burn him. I'll see it every time I close my eyes for the rest of my life. I know. The president sat beside her. Ji-won, I need something from you. Something difficult. What? I want you to be our next ambassador to the Galactic Council. When this war ends, someone will have to rebuild diplomatic relations. It should be you. You witnessed what happened. You understand the stakes." Ji-won stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to go back there? To work with the species that murdered Hyunwoo?" "Eventually, yes. Not now. First, we make them pay. We make them understand what they've done. But when the fighting stops, we'll need someone who can speak for humanity without losing sight of why this war started. Someone who will never forget what happened in that chamber." Ji-won was quiet for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "I'll do it, but only after justice is served." "Agreed." Across the galaxy, the Veltharan hierarch Velmoth relaxed in his palace on Velthara Prime. The execution had gone perfectly. The other council species had fallen in line as expected. The humans would protest for a while, maybe impose some trade sanctions, but ultimately they would accept their place in the galactic order. His military advisor, Commander Tekval, entered the throne room. "Hierarch, we have a problem. 3 of our patrol ships in the border sector have stopped responding. Equipment malfunction?" Velmoth waved a claw dismissively. "Perhaps, but all 3 at once seems unlikely. I've dispatched a frigate to investigate. Keep me informed." Tekval bowed and left. Velmoth returned to reviewing trade agreements. The humans had ceased all commerce with Veltharan merchants. Annoying, but not significant. Human goods were primitive anyway. That night, the frigate Velmoth sent to investigate also went silent. Then a destroyer. Then an entire supply convoy vanished between 2 jump points. Within 24 hours, 7 Veltharan ships had disappeared without any distress signals. Tekval stood before the hierarch again, this time with obvious concern. "We've lost contact with 9 vessels now. I believe we're under attack." "From whom? Have the humans declared war?" "No formal declaration. But who else would it be?" Velmoth's mandibles clicked in agitation. "They wouldn't dare. Deploy additional patrols. Find out what's happening." More ships were sent. More ships vanished. The Veltharan military command began to panic. They increased sensor sweeps, doubled patrols, and put all border fleets on high alert. Nothing helped. Ships continued to disappear like ghosts in the night. On the bridge of the stealth destroyer Seoul's Vengeance, Captain Lee Dong-min studied the tactical display. His ship was invisible to every sensor the Veltharans possessed. They were only 300 kilometers from a Veltharan cruiser, and the enemy had no idea. "Target locked," his weapons officer reported. "Fire." A single kinetic projectile launched at near light speed. It struck the cruiser's reactor core before their shields could activate. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash. By the time the wreckage stopped tumbling, Seoul's Vengeance was already 10,000 kilometers away, moving to the next target. Captain Lee kept a tally on the wall of his cabin. 14 Veltharan ships destroyed, 0 human casualties. This was only the beginning. Back on Earth, Dr. An presented the final weapon to Admiral Park in private. "This one we don't tell anyone about. Not even the President knows." "What is it?" "A star killer. Technically a stellar compression device. We deploy it near a sun, and it accelerates the fusion process. Within a few weeks, the star goes supernova. Everything in that solar system is destroyed." Park felt cold. "That's genocide." "Yes, that's exactly what it is. But if they push us far enough, if they try to exterminate humanity, we need the option to respond in kind. Mutually assured destruction kept the peace on Earth for 100 years. Build 3 of them. Keep them in secure storage. Tell no one. And pray we never need them." Dr. An nodded and left. Admiral Park stood alone in his office, looking at the photo of Ambassador Hyunwoo on his desk. The man smiled in the picture. Taken during happier times when humanity still believed the galaxy was a civilized place. We're doing terrible things in your name, Park whispered to the photo. I hope you understand. I hope you forgive us. The next morning, Admiral Park addressed the entire military via holographic broadcast. Hundreds of thousands of personnel watched from ships, bases, and training facilities. We've been striking the Veltharans for 4 days now. They've lost nearly 50 ships and have no idea how or why. Fear is spreading through their ranks. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them understand what it feels like to be helpless. He paused, letting his words sink in. But this is just the opening move. Soon they'll adapt, reinforce their fleets, and prepare for conventional war. That's when the real fight begins. Many of you will die in the coming months. I won't lie about that. But you'll die knowing that humanity stands for something, that we don't accept the murder of our people, that we'll fight anyone, no matter how powerful, who threatens our right to exist. His voice grew harder. The Galactic Council thinks we're children playing at war. They think we'll exhaust ourselves and sue for peace. They're wrong. We're going to show them what humans are capable of when pushed to the edge. We're going to rewrite their understanding of warfare. And when it's over, they'll never underestimate us again. The broadcast ended. Across human space, soldiers prepared for battle. Engineers worked overtime building ships. Scientists developed new weapons. And everywhere, from Earth to the furthest colony, people watched the news and waited. The storm was gathering. Soon it would break across the galaxy with terrible force. First blood. 3 weeks had passed since the first Veltharan ships vanished. The disappearances continued with mechanical precision. A patrol here, a supply convoy there. Always in different locations. Always without witnesses. The Veltharan military was bleeding ships and didn't know how to stop it. Captain Lee Dongmin sat in the command chair of Seoul's Vengeance, studying sensor data. His ship had been operating behind enemy lines for 21 days now. The crew was tired but focused. They'd destroyed 19 Veltharan vessels without taking a single hit. Contact, his sensor officer reported. Veltharan heavy cruiser, bearing 270, range 400 kilometers. Weapon status? All systems ready, sir. Lee studied the tactical display. The cruiser was alone, which was unusual. The Veltharans had started grouping their ships together for mutual protection. This one must have gotten separated from its formation. Take us in close. I want to see something. Seoul's Vengeance drifted silently toward the enemy ship. The quantum masking made them invisible not just to sensors, but to naked eyes as well. They could fly right up to a window, and the enemy wouldn't see them. Lee activated the external cameras and zoomed in on the cruiser's bridge. Through the transparent sections of the hull, he could see Veltharan crew members moving around. They looked nervous, constantly checking displays. Some held weapons, as if expecting boarders. They're terrified, his first officer observed. Look at them. It was true. The Veltharans were jumping at shadows. Every few minutes, someone would rush to a console as if responding to a sensor ghost. The psychological warfare was working better than expected. Sir, we could end this quickly with a single shot, the weapons officer said. No, not yet. I want them to suffer a while longer. Lee's voice was cold. He'd watched the recording of Ambassador Hyun Woo's execution 17 times. Each viewing made his resolve harder. Let them feel what it's like to be hunted. They shadowed the cruiser for 6 hours. Finally, as it approached a jump point, Lee gave the order. Target their engines. Fire! The kinetic rounds struck with perfect precision. The cruiser's main engines exploded, leaving the ship drifting helplessly. Emergency systems activated, trying to restore power. Should we finish them? The weapons officer asked. No, leave them alive. Let them tell their people what it's like to fight an enemy you cannot see. Seoul's Vengeance jumped away, leaving the crippled cruiser behind. 3 days later, Lee learned that it took the Veltharans 48 hours to find and rescue that ship. The crew was hospitalized for psychological trauma. Several had broken down completely, convinced invisible demons were hunting them. Good, Lee thought. Let them be afraid. But the Veltharans were not cowards. Hierarch Velmoth, furious at the ongoing losses, mobilized their greatest weapon. The dreadnought Coruscant was the pride of the Veltharan fleet. 3 kilometers long, armed with enough firepower to level a planet and protected by shields that could withstand nuclear weapons. It was escorted by 20 smaller warships and carried 5,000 crew members. "Let the humans try to attack this," Velmoth declared at a military briefing. "The Coruscant will be stationed at our primary naval base at Velkanos Station. It will serve as a symbol that we are not afraid of their cowardly tactics." Commander Tech Val was less certain. "Hierarch, perhaps we should keep the Coruscant mobile. A stationary target is exactly what we need. We want the humans to know where our strength is. We want them to see that they cannot touch our most powerful vessel." The Coruscant arrived at Velkanos Station with great ceremony. News networks across the galaxy broadcast its arrival. The message was clear. The Veltharans remained strong despite human attacks. Commander Yoon Min Seo watched the broadcast from her office on Earth. She smiled slowly. They just made a mistake. Her team had been planning this operation for 2 weeks. Getting agents aboard Velkanos Station was nearly impossible. The security was too tight. But the Veltharans had just brought their dreadnought to the station. That changed everything. "Activate Operation Prometheus," she ordered. "All teams proceed." In the cargo bays of Velkanos Station, among thousands of supply containers, were 15 that belonged to a merchant ship that had visited the station weeks ago. Those containers held specialized equipment and, more importantly, human special operations soldiers in suspended animation. The containers were designed to pass any security scan. They showed normal readings for machinery parts. The stasis chambers that held the soldiers were shielded against thermal detection. When the containers were unloaded and stored in the station's cargo area, no one suspected anything. Now those containers opened. 15 soldiers emerged, led by Lieutenant Kwon Yu-jin. They wore stealth suits that bent light around them, making them nearly invisible. They moved through the cargo bay like ghosts. "Sound off," Kwon whispered into her comm. 14 other voices confirmed readiness. The team split into 3 groups. The first group headed for the station's reactor control. The second moved toward the Coruscant's docking clamps. The third, led by Kwon herself, infiltrated the dreadnought. Getting aboard the Coruscant was surprisingly easy. The Veltharans were watching for external threats, not infiltrators already on the station. Kwon's team slipped through a maintenance airlock while technicians were distracted with routine checks. Inside the dreadnought, they navigated using stolen schematics. Human intelligence had been gathering information about Veltharan ship designs for years. Every piece of data now proved valuable. They reached the reactor room 40 minutes after boarding. 2 Veltharan engineers worked at control consoles. Kwon signaled her team. Neural disruptors fired silently. The engineers collapsed, unconscious but alive. "Plant the charges," Kwon ordered. Her demolitions expert, Corporal Han Jae-sung, placed 16 fusion charges throughout the reactor chamber. Each charge was small, no larger than a fist, but together they would create a cascade reaction that would destroy the ship from the inside. "Charges set. Timer ready." "Good. Everyone out." They exfiltrated the same way they'd entered. Meanwhile, the other 2 teams completed their objectives. The station's reactor was rigged to overload. The docking clamps were sabotaged to release at a specific moment. All 3 teams regrouped in the cargo bay. They sealed themselves back into the containers and activated the stasis fields. To anyone scanning, they would appear to be simple machinery waiting for transport. 8 hours later, during a routine shift change when security was at its lowest alert, the charges detonated. The Coruscant exploded from within. The fusion charges created a chain reaction that tore through the ship's core. Within seconds, the mighty dreadnought became an expanding ball of superheated plasma. The explosion was so violent that it damaged the docking clamps beyond the sabotage already done. Debris from the Coruscant slammed into Velcano Station. Hull breaches opened across 3 sections. The station's reactor, already rigged to fail, went critical. Automatic safety systems tried to activate, but found their controls had been compromised. Velcanos Station, the largest military installation in Veltharan space, tore itself apart. 5,000 crew members on the Coruscant died instantly. Another 12,000 on the station perished in the explosions and decompression. But Quan's team had planned for evacuation. The cargo containers they hid in were tagged for emergency jettison. When the station began to break apart, automated systems launched all cargo toward a nearby uninhabited moon. 3 days later, a human recovery ship picked up the containers. All 15 soldiers survived. They'd struck the greatest blow against the Veltharans yet, and the enemy never knew humans had been aboard. The destruction of the Coruscant shocked the galaxy. News networks showed the wreckage on endless loops. The mighty dreadnought, symbol of Veltharan power, was gone. Military analysts couldn't understand how. There had been no attack, no human ships detected anywhere near the station. Hierarch Velmoth convened an emergency military council. How did this happen? How did the humans destroy our greatest ship? Commander Tekval looked pale. We don't know, Hierarch. There's no evidence of external attack. It appears the reactor simply failed, but our engineers say that's impossible with our safety systems. Then it was sabotage. The humans infiltrated our station. Impossible. Security logs show no unauthorized access. All personnel were verified Veltharans or allied species. But in the wreckage, investigators found something that made their blood run cold. Burned into an intact section of the Coruscant's hull, in perfect Veltharan script, was a message. Yun Wu sends his regards. The message spread across the galaxy within hours. Humanity had not only destroyed the dreadnought, but had left a calling card. The implications were terrifying. If humans could infiltrate the most secure military station in Veltharan space, nowhere was safe. Admiral Park watched the news with satisfaction from his command ship. Well done, Commander Yoon. Absolutely perfect. Thank you, sir. What's our next move? Now we wait. The Veltharans will be paranoid, checking every station, every ship, every cargo container. They'll exhaust themselves looking for infiltrators. Meanwhile, our ghost ships continue their campaign. We're bleeding them from 2 directions, and they can't defend against either. On Viridian Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Veltharan representative demanded that the Council formally declare humanity a hostile species and commit all member fleets to joint military action. 3 species agreed, the Torvan, Krellians, and Saxith. They'd all voted for Hyunwoo's execution. Now they pledged ships and resources to the war effort. The other species were more cautious. The Nexians outright refused. We warned you this would happen. You executed their ambassador in violation of every civilized principle. Humanity is responding to your crime, not initiating one. They destroyed 17,000 of our people, the Veltharan representative shrieked. You burned one of theirs alive on galactic television, the Nexian replied calmly. What did you expect? That they would simply accept it? The council split into factions. Those who supported the Veltharans versus those who refused to fight humanity. Several neutral species began quietly reaching out to human diplomats, trying to negotiate separate peace agreements. On Earth, President Choi Dae-yoon addressed the planet again. The Veltharans have lost their greatest warship. Their allies gathered to support them. The galaxy is choosing sides. Soon we'll face the largest armada ever assembled in this sector of space. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. We could stop now. accept a negotiated settlement, return to how things were. But if we do that, nothing will have changed. The next time there's a conflict, they'll feel free to murder us again." Her voice grew strong. "So we continue. We fight until they understand that humanity cannot be casually destroyed. We fight until the galaxy accepts that we deserve the same rights and respect as any other species. We fight until justice is served." Across human space, the response was unanimous. They would fight, they would win, or they would die trying. Admiral Park issued new orders. The ghost ships would continue their campaign. Special operations would keep infiltrating enemy installations. But now they would prepare for conventional warfare. The enemy armada was coming, and when it arrived, humanity would be ready. In the shadows between stars, the ghost ships hunted. On Earth and the colonies, factories worked day and night building weapons and ships. In secret facilities, Dr. On's scientists developed new horrors to unleash. The first blood had been drawn. The Coruscant was destroyed, and with it the myth of Veltharan invincibility. But the real war was just beginning. The human way of war. The armada that assembled in Veltharan space was the largest military force seen in a century. 3,200 warships from 4 different species, all united to crush humanity. The Veltharans contributed the most ships, nearly 2,000. The Torvan, Krellians, and Saxith added the rest. Fleet Admiral Korvax commanded from the battleship Eternal Glory. He was a veteran of 12 campaigns and had never lost a battle. As he studied the tactical displays showing his massive fleet, he felt confident. The humans had only been in space for 50 years. They couldn't possibly stand against this force. "All ships report ready," his communications officer announced. "Excellent. Set course for the human colony world of New Hanseong. We'll demonstrate what happens to species that attack their betters." The armada moved through space like a metal tide. Their formation was perfect, a textbook arrangement that maximized shield overlap and firing arcs. Military academies would study this fleet composition for years to come. New Hanseong was humanity's second colony world, home to 2 billion people. The planet was beautiful, with vast oceans and forests. Humans had been settling there for 30 years, building cities and farms. Now that peaceful world became a battlefield. Admiral Park's defense fleet waited in orbit. 400 human ships arranged in loose clusters rather than formal lines. To the experienced eyes of Fleet Admiral Korvax, it looked disorganized, almost amateur. "They don't even know proper formation," he commented to his tactical officer. "This will be over quickly." He had no idea how wrong he was. As the armadas closed to weapon range, Admiral Park gave an unusual order. "Release the swarms." From every human ship, launch bays opened. What emerged wasn't missiles or fighters in the traditional sense. It was a cloud, a swarm of thousands of small drones. Each drone was only 2 meters long, equipped with a simple kinetic weapon and basic shields. Individually, they were almost worthless. Together, they became a nightmare. The swarm moved like a living thing, flowing and shifting as it approached the enemy fleet. The Veltharan weapons officers opened fire, destroying hundreds of drones, but thousands more kept coming. "Sir, there are too many targets," a weapons officer reported to Korvax. "Our targeting computers can't prioritize properly." "Then fire manually. They're just small drones. Destroy them." But the drones were learning. Each one was controlled by advanced AI that adapted in real time. They studied the enemy firing patterns, learned to dodge, found weaknesses in the targeting algorithms. As the Veltharan gunners destroyed more drones, the remaining ones became harder to hit. The swarm reached the enemy formation and penetrated their shields. The drones weren't trying to destroy capital ships. Instead, they targeted sensors, weapons arrays, communication dishes, anything external and vulnerable. A Torvan cruiser lost all its sensors as 50 drones crashed into its sensor towers. Blinded, it drifted helplessly. A Krellian destroyer had its main cannons disabled when drones jammed themselves into the barrel assemblies. Across the enemy formation, ships found themselves degraded and crippled by an enemy too small to efficiently target. While the swarm created chaos, the human fleet struck. But they didn't engage in traditional line battles. Instead, they used hit-and-run tactics that confused the enemy. Commander Bei Su-young led a wing of bomber ships. They didn't attack from the front where shields were strongest. Instead, they came from above and below, targeting the weaker dorsal and ventral shields. Their weapons weren't designed to punch through armor. They were precision tools aimed at critical systems. A Veltharan battleship took 3 hits to its engine sections. The ship didn't explode dramatically. It simply stopped accelerating, its main engines offline. Life support continued functioning, shields held, weapons still fired, but the ship was effectively out of the battle. This was the human way of war. Don't destroy what you can disable. Don't kill what you can neutralize. Make every enemy ship a burden on their logistics, rather than a memory. Fleet Admiral Korvax watched his perfect formation fall apart. Ships collided with each other trying to dodge the swarms. Communication broke down as relay stations were destroyed. The carefully planned battle became a chaotic mess. "All ships, fall back to defensive formation," he ordered. But falling back was harder than expected. The human ships were faster, more maneuverable. They had less armor, but could accelerate and turn with incredible speed. When the enemy tried to retreat, human ships pursued, constantly harassing, never allowing a moment of rest. Captain Lee Dongmin's soul's vengeance emerged from stealth in the middle of the enemy formation. His ship appeared on sensors for exactly 12 seconds, long enough to launch a full spread of kinetic missiles at a Saxith heavy cruiser. The missiles struck the ship's reactor cooling systems. The cruiser didn't explode, but its reactor began overheating. The crew had to shut it down completely, leaving the ship powerless. Then Soul's vengeance vanished again, quantum masking making it invisible. The enemy fired at where it had been, hitting nothing but empty space. The battle lasted 14 hours. At the end, the enemy armada had lost only 200 ships completely destroyed. But over 900 were crippled or disabled. Crews were dead or dying not from explosions, but from life support failures, radiation leaks from damaged reactors, or simply freezing as power systems failed. Admiral Park's fleet lost 63 ships. Every loss hurt, but the exchange ratio was 15-1 in humanity's favor. Fleet Admiral Korvax, his flagship damaged and drifting, stared at the tactical display in disbelief. How did they do this? His tactical officer looked pale. "Sir, they didn't fight like any enemy we've faced before. They didn't try to destroy us. They tried to disable us, to turn our own ships into liabilities." Where did they learn such tactics? The officer pulled up human historical data. From their own history. Humans fought wars on their home planet for thousands of years before reaching space. They developed countless strategies and tactics. What we saw today was called asymmetric warfare, where a smaller force defeats a larger one through unconventional methods. Korvax felt something he hadn't experienced in his long military career: fear. The humans weren't fighting by the rules everyone else understood. They were rewriting the rules entirely. Back on New Hanseong, people watched the battle from the surface. When the enemy fleet began retreating, leaving behind hundreds of crippled ships, the entire planet erupted in celebration. They'd survived. Their small fleet had defeated an armada 30 times larger, but Admiral Park didn't celebrate. He knew this was just the first major battle. The enemy would adapt, would learn from their mistakes. The next fight would be harder. On Earth, President Choi Da-un addressed the nation. "Today we proved that numbers alone don't determine victory. The enemy came with 3,000 ships thinking we would crumble. Instead, they fled with less than half their fleet still functional. She paused, her expression serious. But don't think this war is over. The enemy has resources we can only dream of. They can replace their losses. The question is, can we? Every ship we lose is irreplaceable. Every soldier who dies cannot be brought back. We won this battle through skill and innovation, but we can't win the war on those alone. Behind the scenes, Dr. An was already deploying the next weapon. High above the battlefield, in the debris field left by the engagement, she'd planted thousands of nanite dispersal packages. They looked like pieces of wreckage, uninteresting and ignored. But those packages were slowly releasing clouds of microscopic machines. Over the next several days, those nanites would drift toward the crippled enemy ships. They would find their way through hull breaches and damaged seals, and once inside, they would begin dismantling shield generators at the molecular level. When the enemy tried to repair those ships, they would find that their shields no longer worked. The ships would need to return to shipyards for complete rebuilds. The damage seemed random, impossible to explain. The enemy engineers would waste months trying to understand what went wrong. Commander Yoon Min-seo prepared her teams for the next phase. While the enemy was distracted by the battle's aftermath, her infiltrators would strike deeper, not at military targets this time, but at infrastructure. Power stations, communication hubs, manufacturing facilities. The goal was to slow the enemy war machine, to make every replacement ship harder to build. But the humans also learned from the battle. The swarm drones had worked brilliantly, but the enemy would adapt. Dr. An began developing second-generation swarms that could handle improved defenses. The bomber tactics were effective, but they'd lost 30 bombers in the engagement. Commander Bay studied the combat recordings, looking for ways to improve survival rates. She noticed that the bombers that survived were the ones that struck quickly and disengaged immediately. She adjusted doctrine accordingly. Hit once, then run. Never press an attack. 3 days after the battle, a Veltharan supply convoy jumped into a seemingly empty system. Within minutes, they were surrounded by ghost ships that appeared from nowhere. Captain Lee's Soul's Vengeance led the attack. "Target their life support and engines," Lee ordered. "Leave the hulls intact." The convoy ships were disabled within an hour. Their crews abandoned ship in escape pods. The ghost ships collected the pods and released them near a Veltharan outpost with a message. "Your people live because we choose mercy. Remember that when you think about burning our ambassadors." These actions began to wear on enemy morale. The Veltharan military was used to glorious battles and honorable combat. This was neither. This was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that appeared from nowhere, struck without warning, and vanished before anyone could respond. Back on Velthara Prime, Hierarch Velmoth faced growing dissent. Noble houses that had supported the war began questioning the strategy. Why had they executed the human ambassador? The insult to their sacred space could have been addressed through fines or reparations. Instead, they'd started a war that was consuming their resources and killing their people. "We must increase production," Velmoth insisted at a council meeting. "Build more ships, train more soldiers." One of the noble representatives spoke up. "Hierarch, we've lost over 1,000 ships in 3 months. Our shipyards are working at maximum capacity, but it takes a year to build a cruiser. Meanwhile, the humans keep destroying our vessels faster than we can replace them. Then we need allies. The Council must provide more support." But the Council species were having second thoughts. The Torvan had lost 200 ships in the Battle of New Hanseong. Their government was facing protests from families who'd lost loved ones. The Krellians and Saxith were similarly shaken. The Nexian representative addressed the council. "I warned you this would happen. You can't murder an ambassador and expect no consequences. Humanity is demonstrating exactly why those laws exist. Stop this war before more of your people die," the Veltharan representative hissed in fury. "You would abandon us? We are fighting to preserve the galactic order." "You're fighting to avoid admitting you made a mistake," the Nexian replied calmly. "The humans didn't start this war. You did when you lit that pyre." The session devolved into shouting. The council was fracturing. Some species quietly began withdrawing their support. Others doubled down, too proud to admit fault. Admiral Park watched these developments through human intelligence networks. "They're breaking," he told his staff. "The question is whether they break before we do." Commander Yoon looked at casualty reports. 23,000 human soldiers and spacers dead so far. Every name, every face represented someone's child, parent, or spouse. The weight of those losses was heavy. "Can we win?" she asked quietly. "We have to," Admiral Park replied, "because if we lose, they'll know they can kill us without consequence. Every human in the galaxy will become a potential target. We win or we doom our species to eternal victimhood." The war ground on. Battles were fought across a dozen star systems. The enemy had numbers, but humans had innovation. The enemy had experience, but humans had desperation. And in war, a desperate enemy fighting for survival is the most dangerous kind. In the darkness between stars, the ghost ships continued their hunt. On occupied worlds, human colonists fortified their homes. In shipyards across 4 solar systems, new vessels took shape. The enemy thought they understood war. They thought battles were about formations and firepower. But humans knew better. War was about will. War was about making the enemy question whether victory was worth the cost. And with every passing day, the enemy's will grew weaker, while humanity's only strengthened. The burning of Velthara Prime. 6 months of war had passed. The Veltharan fleet was a shadow of its former strength. Out of 2,000 ships they'd started with, fewer than 600 remained operational. Their allies had mostly withdrawn, no longer willing to sacrifice their people for a war that seemed unwinnable. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the holographic display. Before him floated Velthara Prime, the homeworld of the species that had executed Ambassador Hyun-woo. The planet was beautiful, with purple oceans and silver cities that gleamed in the light of their yellow sun. "All fleets in position," Commander Yoon reported. "We have complete orbital control. Nothing gets in or out." Park nodded slowly. Getting here had cost humanity dearly. 84,000 soldiers and spacers dead. Hundreds of ships destroyed. 4 colonies attacked in desperation raids. But they'd won. The human fleet now surrounded the Veltharan homeworld, and the enemy had nothing left to stop them. "Sir, we're receiving communication requests from the Galactic Council," the communications officer said. "They're begging us to accept surrender terms. Tell them we'll consider surrender when it's offered by the people who actually murdered our ambassador. Until then, they can watch what happens when you start wars with humans." President Choi Da-un had authorized this operation personally. Her message had been clear. Make them understand. Make the entire galaxy understand, but don't become the monsters they claimed we were. That last part was important. The easy thing would be to bombard Velthara Prime from orbit to turn their cities to ash and their oceans to steam. But that would make humanity no better than those who'd burned Hyun-woo alive. Instead, Admiral Park initiated a blockade. Nothing would enter or leave the planet. No food shipments, no medical supplies, no communication with the outside galaxy. Velthara Prime would be isolated completely. "Deploy the atmospheric processors," he ordered. Dr. On's scientists had developed a device that could be placed in orbit. It didn't destroy anything. It simply broadcast a jamming signal that disrupted all electronic communication and shut down shield generators. Within hours, every piece of advanced technology on Velthara Prime stopped working. Power plants failed. Transportation systems died. Communication networks went dark. The Veltharans, who had been spacefaring for 3,000 years, suddenly found themselves living like primitives. But even then, humans didn't kill them. The blockade would create hardship, yes. Food would become scarce, life would be difficult, but the Veltharans would survive. "Now we wait," Admiral Park said. "Eventually, their leadership will realize they have no choice but to surrender." But Hierarch Velmoth was stubborn. From his palace on the surface, now running on backup generators, he broadcast defiant messages to his people. "The humans seek to break our spirit. We will endure. We will never surrender to these primitive apes." Lieutenant Quan Yu-jin led the Marine landing forces. 50,000 human soldiers descended to the planet's surface in dropships. Their mission was not to conquer the population. It was to systematically dismantle the Veltharan military infrastructure. The Marines moved through the cities with discipline. When they encountered military installations, they attacked with precision. When they found civilians, they provided food and medical care. This confused the Veltharans, whose own military doctrine didn't distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. In the city of Kortekla, Lieutenant Quan's unit encountered a Veltharan militia group that had barricaded themselves in a school building. The building also housed 200 civilian children. "We could level the building," Sergeant Han Jae-sung suggested. "End this quickly." "No," Quan said firmly. "We're not here to kill children. We're here to prove we're better than they are." They negotiated for 6 hours. Finally, the militia agreed to surrender if the children were guaranteed safety. Quan gave her word. The children were evacuated first. Then the militia members laid down their weapons. Not a single shot was fired. A civilian Veltharan teacher approached Quan afterward. "Why did you do that? We are your enemy." "Those children aren't our enemy," Quan replied. "They're just kids. We don't make war on children." The teacher looked at her strangely. "But your ambassador, he had no children?" "He had 2, a son and daughter. They watched the recording of their father burning to death." The teacher's mandibles clicked in what might have been shame or regret. She walked away without another word. These stories spread across Velthera Prime. The humans were brutal to military targets, destroying bases and weapon depots without mercy. But to civilians, they were unexpectedly kind. Humans shared their food rations with hungry Veltharan families. Human medics treated wounded Veltharans. Human engineers helped restore power to hospitals. This psychological warfare was more effective than bombs. The Veltharan population began questioning why they were fighting. Their government had told them humans were monsters, but the monsters were feeding their children and healing their sick. Commander Yoon Min Seo had a different mission. She led a special operations team deep into the capital city, targeting the Hierarch's palace. Intelligence suggested Velmoth was hiding in a bunker beneath the structure, protected by his elite guard. Getting into the palace was easier than expected. The Veltharan guards were demoralized and poorly coordinated. Many surrendered immediately when human soldiers appeared. Others fled. Only the elite guard, fanatically loyal to Velmoth, actually fought. The battle in the palace corridors was brutal but brief. The elite guard were skilled warriors, but they were fighting with primitive weapons against humans equipped with advanced combat armor and weapons. Within 2 hours, the palace was secured. Yoon found the bunker entrance and descended. At the bottom, Hierarch Velmoth waited with his last dozen guards. He stood tall, mandibles raised in defiance. "You will not take me alive," he declared. "I will die with honor, as is my right." "You'll do what we tell you," Yoon replied coldly. "You're under arrest for war crimes, specifically for the orchestrated murder of Ambassador Kang Hyun-woo." "I am a hierarch. You have no authority to arrest me." "We have the authority of military victory. You lost. Now you answer for your crimes." The guards attacked. It was suicide. And they knew it, but loyalty demanded they try. The fight lasted 30 seconds. When it was over, all 12 guards lay dead or unconscious. Velmoth stood alone, holding a ceremonial blade. "I will not be taken," he repeated. Yoon shot the blade out of his hand with precise marksmanship. "Yes, you will. Because unlike you, we believe in justice, not revenge. You'll face trial. You'll be allowed to defend yourself. You'll have what you denied Ambassador Hyunwoo." They dragged Velmoth out of the bunker in restraints. The broadcast went out across every network humanity could access. The mighty hierarch, who had ordered the execution of a human ambassador, was now a prisoner. The trial was held in orbit aboard the human flagship. It was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Ji-Wan, who had been appointed as the new human ambassador, personally delivered the charges. "Hierarch Velmoth, you are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, orchestrating false accusations, and violating the sanctity of diplomatic immunity. The evidence will show that you deliberately lured human exploration vessels into your sacred space, then used their accidental intrusion as an excuse to execute Ambassador Hyunwoo. The evidence Ji-Wan had stolen from Viridian Prime was presented. Communication logs showing Velmoth ordering the navigation database altered. Orders to military units to allow human ships into forbidden zones. Messages to other council members explaining the plan to teach the humans their place. The galaxy watched in shock as the conspiracy unfolded. The execution hadn't been about justice or sacred laws. It had been premeditated murder designed to humiliate humanity and solidify Veltharan dominance. Velmoth was given defense counsel, human lawyers who argued every legal point in his favor. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every witness was questioned. Every piece of evidence was examined. This was human justice in full display, deliberate and thorough. The jury, composed of humans from different colonies and backgrounds, deliberated for 2 days. They found Velmoth guilty on all charges. President Choi Da-eun delivered the sentence personally. She stood before Velmoth in the courtroom, her face carved from stone. "You murdered our ambassador because you thought we were weak. You thought we would accept it. You were wrong. Your actions have cost hundreds of thousands of lives on both sides. Your civilization lies in ruins. Your people suffer because of your pride and cruelty." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The easy thing would be to execute you, to burn you alive as you burned Ambassador Hyunwoo, to show you the same mercy you showed him, which is to say none at all." Velmoth waited, mandibles trembling. He expected death. "But we are better than you," Choi continued. "We believe justice and vengeance are different things. So here is your sentence, life imprisonment. You will spend the rest of your days in a human prison, watching as we rebuild your world better than you ever could. You will witness humanity becoming everything you claimed we weren't. Civilized, just merciful, and you will know that your legacy is teaching the galaxy why ambassadors are sacred." The sentence shocked everyone. The galaxy had expected execution. Instead, humans demonstrated restraint, proving they were more civilized than the species who'd ruled the stars for millennia. On Velthara Prime, the remaining military command surrendered unconditionally. Without Velmoth's leadership and facing an enemy that had proven both powerful and merciful, they saw no point in continuing. The Galactic Council, watching from Viridian Prime, sat in stunned silence. The chamber where Hyunwoo had burned now felt like a tomb. The Council's authority was shattered. 3 member species had already withdrawn completely. Others were demanding reforms. Admiral Park stood down his forces. The blockade remained, but humanitarian aid was allowed through. Human ships brought food, medicine, and supplies to the suffering Veltharan population. Engineers helped restore power plants and water systems. "Why are you helping us?" a Veltharan citizen asked a human aid worker. "We tried to destroy you." "Because the war is over," the human replied. "Your leaders made bad decisions. But you people don't deserve to starve because of what your government did. We're not monsters. We never were. Slowly, Velthara Prime began to recover. Human administrators worked with Veltharan reformers to establish a new government, one without the old military aristocracy. Elections were scheduled. Representatives would be chosen by the people, not by noble birth. The transformation was painful but necessary. The old Veltharan Empire was dead. In its place, something new was being born. A society that would exist under human supervision until it could stand on its own, governed by laws that protected everyone equally. Back on Earth, memorials were held for the 84,000 humans who had died. Each name was read aloud, each face shown on screens. President Choi attended memorial after memorial, looking into the eyes of families who had lost loved ones. "We won," she told them, "but victory feels hollow when I see what it cost. Your loved ones gave everything so that humanity could stand equal in the galaxy. They died so that no one would ever burn our ambassadors again. We will honor them by building a future worthy of their sacrifice." Admiral Park stood at the Hyunwoo Memorial on Earth, looking at the ambassador's name carved in stone. Around him were the names of thousands of others who had fallen. The inscription above read, "They gave us fire. We gave them civilization." Ji-won joined him, wearing the formal robes of an ambassador. "Do you think he would be proud of what we did?" Park considered this. Proud? Maybe. But I think he'd also be sad. He wanted humanity to join the galactic community peacefully. Instead, we had to fight our way in. We tried peace. They answered with fire. True. And now we've proven that humans can't be casually murdered. But at what cost? Park gestured at the memorial. 84,000 lives, hundreds of thousands of Veltharans dead. Resources spent that could have built colonies and schools. All because one species decided to teach us a lesson. Ji-won nodded slowly. The galaxy learned a different lesson. They learned that humanity keeps its word. We said we would make them pay for Hyunwoo's death. We did. And when we won, we showed mercy instead of cruelty. That matters. I hope you're right. You're going back to the council? Yes. Someone has to represent humanity in the new order. It should be someone who remembers why this war started. Someone who will never let them forget what happens when you violate diplomatic immunity. Park smiled slightly. You'll do well. Just remember, we didn't fight this war to become tyrants. We fought to be equals. I'll remember. That's a promise.